Hello, I'm Andrew Kolbert, the President and Chief Technical Officer at Avomeen, and I'm here to talk to you today about careers in chemistry, a case for CROs. We'll talk about what sort of careers there are for chemists, what sort of companies hire chemists, what is a CRO and why do they exist, and why would anyone ever want to work in one? What kind of companies use CROs, and what sort of things do they do for them? Let's first talk about what kind of jobs do chemists have? Well, chemists work in industry, education, and government. Let's take a look at these different sorts of jobs. In industry, you have laboratory positions where chemists with a high school degree or bachelor's degree work as lab technicians. They do routine tasks, have fairly close supervision, perhaps somewhat limited growth. There are chemists with bachelor's degrees in chemistry and master's degrees. They do data acquisition and analysis, work under somewhat limited supervision, and have growth potential. And then there are senior scientists, which have some degree of graduate school, master's degrees, often PhDs. They work in R&D and project management, have minimal supervision, and have growth potential. The problems that industrial chemists address are varied. In manufacturing, there's good material, bad material, and you have to analyze them and see, well, what happened? What's the difference between them? You support R&D. R&D thinks they made something. What do they really make? Customer complaints, something that comes back in from the field. This part failed. This product failed. What happened? Competitive intelligence. My competitors have this product. It's beating me in the marketplace. What is it? How did they make it? Pharmaceutical testing under a wide variety of regulations. Food testing, cosmetic testing, all regulatory driven. Making things, new chemical synthesis. In education, there are chemists throughout the entire academic path, from grade school teachers to small college professors to university professors. Small college professors typically do more teaching than research. Some degree of research with undergraduates. University professors tend to have major research programs and do some teaching, but the bulk of their career is research. Government hires a large number of chemists as well. Agencies like the Food and Drug Administration, who reviews all of the pharmaceutical, new drug, and generic drug applications for content, hires chemists. They have laboratories that do pharmaceutical testing so they can verify that drugs are safe. The Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA, has chemists. The FBI has a great lab in Quantico where they have a wide variety of different techniques, and they hire chemists to assist with an entire range of law investigation. The USDA, the EPA hires chemists as well. A lot of EPA methods are needed to be done in EPA laboratories by chemists. The National Institutes of Health hires a lot of chemists, as does U.S. Customs. The state police departments also hire chemists. They often have smaller versions of crime labs, smaller than the FBI, but they do analytical testing as well and need chemists. Chemists are everywhere. Even in a lot of non-traditional careers that you would think they wouldn't be, but they are everywhere. They're in technical sales. When you are selling chemicals, when you are selling technical equipment, when you are selling technical services, often credibility is key. And the salesperson who knows what they're talking about because they're actually a degreed chemist actually has an edge over the salesperson who doesn't have that technical background. And so many chemists move into technical sales. Library science is another area where you will find chemists. Many companies of significant size have technical libraries. Librarians are involved in doing literature research, doing patent searches, doing all sorts of paper research for the people in the laboratory. And as it turns out, it is a lot easier to teach a chemist library science than it is to teach a librarian chemistry. A lot of chemists lateral into regulatory affairs. You spend the first part of your career working in a lab under regulations, testing products that comply and must comply with certain regulations. And you're reading the regulations to ensure that you comply with them. Eventually, you become an expert in regulations, and you can guide people and advise people in regulations, and often chemists lateral into regulatory affairs. It's not the sort of job that you start out your career in. You spend some time working in the laboratory, working with the regulations, and you move into it. Law firms hire chemists. A lot of law firms deal with highly technical issues in patents and intellectual property disputes, and they need someone to be able to interpret them. They also need to do testing at analytical labs, and having a chemist on staff is really helpful. Often they may want you to get a law degree, in which case they pay for it. Any company more than a couple of hundred people has a full-time safety professional. Large companies may have multiple safety professionals working in safety, health, and environmental, complying with regulations, disposing of hazardous waste, making sure that the laboratory and manufacturing work is done safely. And often chemists are in those roles. And manufacturing, particularly in the role of manufacturing chemicals and products that are made of chemicals, which is many products or most products that are on the market have some sort of chemistry involvement in their manufacturing, as well as testing of their products post-manufacturing, and so they need chemists. Okay, let's talk about these science-based product companies, because you get a degree in chemistry, and you think, well, I'm going to go work for an AbbVie or an Amgen, a Genentech, or a Pfizer, Merck. Let's take a look at what those product companies are like. They have a marketing group which thinks of products, promotes them, a sales group which sells them, but of course R&D has to develop a product. Manufacturing has to make the product, and analytical chemistry provides support in R&D, do the testing, and they provide support in manufacturing. However, the analytical chemist's involvement in the value chain, which is this green arrows leading to the money, is ancillary and longer term. And when going gets tough, often the analytical chemists and the R&D chemists, for that matter, they don't affect the profits of the company in the next week or the next month, and they possibly could get cut in a downturn. Now let's look at a CRO. A CRO is a science-based services company. Marketing promotes analytical development services. Sales sells analytical and product development services. R&D develops products for clients, and analytical chemistry provides analytical services for clients. So marketing is ancillary. Sales is important, of course, and R&D and analytical is firmly ensconced in the value chain of the company, directly responsible for making money, not 5 years down the road, but this month. So where do you think the chemist, who's in the middle of this middle arrow, is going to have more job security? Where do you think the chemist is going to have more visibility for their work? Where do you think the chemist is going to be able to rise to a leadership position in a company? Well, it's this kind of a company in which the chemist's work is core to the company's business. How CROs came to be. Before the 1990s, you had limited capabilities in industry. Most were non-GMP. Today's contract pharmaceutical development market is a $2.8 billion market with over 400 companies providing preclinical development services. 196 in the analytical space, 151 dealing with drug substances alone, 186 providing pharmaceutical R&D, 42 providing GLP tox assays and toxicokinetics, and there are many others. Now, why would a company outsource analytical and development services? Well, if you're in a product-based science company, analytical, as mentioned, is not core to the business. It's not what you do. What you do, what a Pfizer does, is marketing and sales of drug products. Discovery, marketing, and sales. Not analytical. That's not core. The regulatory requirements are onerous. Many smaller companies may not be experts on the regulatory requirements. But the analytical CRO, since they're getting all this work from many different companies, they're experts on the regulations. Many specialties like extractables and leachables or metals analysis are things you need to do once in your product development cycle and then never again. So you don't want to develop that capability internally. You just send it out to a laboratory to whom that work is core. And in many cases, you may have a laboratory, but you simply have a lack of capacity to deal with a short-term surge in work. What kind of companies use CROs? Well, different companies use CROs in different ways. Big pharma does use CROs. Virtual pharma and biotech, and I'll say more about them in a moment, they use CROs. The lawyers use CROs. They have no laboratories of their own. Entrepreneurs use CROs. And manufacturers across all industries use CROs to get their work done and help with their problems. A CRO serving big pharma must provide technical expertise in specialty areas that big pharma may not have. They must have capacity in critical needs areas. They must meet big pharma's quality standards. And they must be on time all the time. Big pharma can do almost everything that the CROs can do. They have this multi-billion-dollar infrastructure in laboratories that they've set up, but they may not have short-term capacity. But they must be on time, and you must have the capacity when they need it. The rise of the CRO. This is a statement from a former CEO of mine, Dennis Stedman at Valsera, who said, if big pharma could do it all over again in the 21st century, they would not build laboratories. This is a bold statement. Big pharma has this $2 billion investment in laboratories, which they set up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and built out prior to the development of the CROs. And so they use it because they have it. But small companies today that start up to do drug development do not build laboratories. Venture capitalists don't want to fund laboratories. So with the rise in CROs, part of that rise in CROs was the rise in the virtual company. The virtual company is the company that has a novel, often a patented technology, something that is theirs, some intellectual property. They've got a checkbook, and they've got a development plan with a timeline. Really, all they need is offices with a bunch of phones and an internet connection, and minimal staff, maybe only half a dozen people. They may not have complete expertise in everything. They may need help. They may need a lot of advising. They may not have any infrastructure, store, ship, repackage samples. They may not have project management staff to manage complex projects in external organizations, so the CRO that they're working with needs to be able to manage the projects internally. The CRO serving virtuals must have that expertise. They need to be able to work with clients to solve the problems in a consultative fashion and bring the clients in on solving their problems. They need to be experts in the regulations because the clients don't have this expertise. Big pharma will have this expertise. They'll have reg affairs groups. A CRO serving a virtual company may not have regulatory expertise. So the CRO that works with them has to be both the scientific expert, the regulatory expert, the quality expert. They need to handle the projects within their organization without expecting the client to project manage the project through their organization because the clients don't have that kind of infrastructure. And they need to have mechanisms to allow for quick response to small requests. I was working with a CRO once. We didn't even have a refrigerator to store samples. So when a sample came into us, we had to send it to a CRO to have them open the box, weigh out samples, repackage into vials, and send to someone else. We didn't have a balance. We didn't have a laboratory. We didn't have vials to repackage samples. So that's a sort of service that you need to be able to provide, and it needs to be quick and flexible, and in order to serve these clients' needs. A CRO that serves lawyers must speak the language. They need to understand the legal process and be willing to be involved in it. They need to be willing to have their people go to depositions because it's going to happen. You solve a problem. There's a party that your client represents, opposing counsel, has a right to talk to your chemists for up to 7 hours on the record and have them in under deposition and ask them a bunch of questions about what they did. And they're going to have all your documentation in front of you, and they're going to say, why did you write down this on this day, and why did you not write this down, or why did you not sign this on that day? Why did you cross this out? 7 hours on the record. So your documentation needs to be bulletproof because you may get questioned on it. You need to have a system to check conflicts. You can't work both sides of a litigation. If you're working for one side, you can't talk to the other side. And in a large company, sometimes that's you don't know what everyone in the company is doing, so you have to be careful and have a system in place to check conflicts to make sure that you are not working in any sense on two sides of a litigation. You have to have a chain of custody process. This is a good idea in any case, but it has to be legally defensible. Often what I've seen in court cases is the opposing counsel can't say anything about the science because it was done correctly, but what they can attack is the sample came into your building. Who signed for it? Well, if someone didn't sign for it and it got checked out, then how do you know it was the same sample that came in? Chain of custody. Who takes it? Who signs for it? When did they test it? When did they return it? That's the sort of thing that lawyers go after because they can affect they can throw out I saw an entire report get thrown out once because a client at one point left a sample in an unlocked room. Well, how do you know that someone didn't walk into that unlocked room in their manufacturing site, swap out these samples? And so all of the testing that was done was thrown out because prior to the sample getting to the laboratory, the client didn't put it in a locked room. These are the sorts of things that chain of custody addresses. Expect a large use of the client's time, a large use of your time by the client, and plan for it. We charge the lawyers a lot of money because they will have conference calls. Again, you may get called into deposition. You may get called as an expert witness. These things take many, many hours in preparation, even when the analysis is fairly straightforward and simple. A CRO serving entrepreneurs must be creative and be able to break down barriers. They must help with how you buy the stuff, sourcing, how you make it, how you patent it, or know where to send the entrepreneur. You can't just say, hey, here's your product, you can deal with the rest of it. The client may not know anything about how to do these things. It's often their first product, an entrepreneur, their first product they've ever thought of. They have an idea, and they want to patent it, and they want you to make it. Be prepared to fail. Every client idea doesn't work. Many times, you're the only person that will be willing to listen to the client and say, well, we'll give it a try. Yes, we can. We can do it. We can try it in any case. And their idea doesn't work. So you need to fail, find a way to fail quickly, find a way to fail inexpensively. Don't bankrupt the client while failing. That requires you have a staged gate process of constantly checking to see progress as you go through. And if it looks like it's not going to work, then you fail and you cut your losses. You get paid for your time, but you don't end up going down a path of many months of charging the client for work that ultimately doesn't end up in a product. We have done a lot of work for entrepreneurs. I'll talk about some of these projects. A lot of Shark Tank ideas. These people that go on Shark Tank, either before they go on Shark Tank or after they go on Shark Tank, they come to laboratories like us, and we develop their products. And many of them have gone on to develop very successful companies with the products we've developed. I'll introduce you to one of them in a bit. A CRO serving manufacturers must be able to solve problems across a range of industries. When you help manufacturers solve problems, it's not just pharmaceutical manufacturers. Maybe downhole drilling applications for oil well people. It may be pharmaceutical manufacturers, cosmetic manufacturers, across an entire range, automotive, windshield people, cleaning solutions people. there's a whole range of industries that chemists can solve problems in. You must be able to schedule rush work with 1 to 2 day response times. When people have manufacturing lines and their lines are shut down because of a problem, time is more important than money. They may have a manufacturing line that produces $300,000 a day in product. And whatever you're charging them, it's not worth being down for an extra day or two. So being able to deal with rush requests on a 1 to 2 day response time is critical. And you need to have flexible systems. Anytime you can cut time out of the process and help them along is something that will allow you to work with them. I'll show you some case studies now. What I like to ask people often is, what do you think is the most quality sensitive industry out there? I'll give you a second to think about it. Most people come up with, oh, well, it ought to be pharmaceuticals, or it ought to be food. Well, actually, those aren't the most quality sensitive industries. If you said semiconductors, you'd have a decent answer, but I think that's even not the right answer there. The most quality sensitive industry is automotive. I'm going to talk about an automotive problem, but if you have a blister on the hood of a BMW, a paint blister, the size of a pencil eraser, and you were to cut blister out and weigh that blister against not even the weight of the car, just the weight of the paint on the car, you probably have like a 10 part per million impurity. Pharmaceuticals don't care about 10 part per million impurities. Food doesn't care about 10 part per million impurities. You can have some percentage of bug parts in food products. Semiconductors cares about small impurities, but 10 parts per million? But if you have a blister in the paint on the hood of a BMW, that car can't be sold. That will shut their production down. And that's your $300,000 a day line or your $1 million a day line. It shuts production down. Well, this is what we found. An automobile manufacturer noticed peeling and premature breakage on an automobile bumper. We found that there was adhesion failure because the bumper was formulated incorrectly. And we fixed the problem, reformulated the formulation, and put a compatibilizer in, and the re-engineered polymer allowed the problem to be fixed, and so they could go back into manufacturing. And here's a non-routine assay for an entrepreneur that developed a product that he said could eliminate formaldehyde from the air. And formaldehyde is a byproduct of flooring, of putting many things in your homes, in your businesses, and he said, well, he had a product that could eliminate formaldehyde from the air. So how do you test that? Well, the first idea is, well, can you just fill up a room with formaldehyde? Well, that's not something that's practical because you fill up a room with formaldehyde and the air conditioning will send it throughout the entire facility and OSHA would be in and shut us down. So that's not practical. But what we can do is we can construct an environmental chamber that allows us to sample from it, put formaldehyde in it, spread it throughout the chamber, measure it at different time points, and turn the device on, turn the device off. We have power going through this whole thing. We constructed this whole thing from plexiglass and pieces and parts bought at Home Depot. And here is the red squares are when the device is not being not turned on. And of course, there's some decrease due to just absorption to the walls. And with the device turned on, the formaldehyde, as determined by the diamonds, goes quickly down. And that proved that the product worked. Innovative solution. Nobody else would have this sort of a solution ready-made, so we had to develop it. This is an example of an entrepreneur that came to us and said, our dog, who lives in the mountains of Colorado, doesn't want to go out because they don't want to put their paws in the snow because there are deep crevices in their paws, and when they put their paws in the snow, they get snow crystals in the crevices and it hurts, and the dogs don't want to go out. So there's a product on the market, some sort of doggy paw wax. And it existed, and you put the wax on the dog's paws, and then the dog is willing to step out there in the snow. Problem is, the product is all petrochemical based. And dog owners don't like putting these petroleum-based products in their dogs. These dogs are like their babies, and they don't want to use these petroleum-based products. So we looked at this product. We deformulated the existing product, took out the petroleum wax, swapped in things like beeswax and carnauba wax and natural waxes, and made the product as an all-natural blend of waxes. And Doggyarchy was launched in 2013 with this product and continues to grow. It is an all-natural alternative to this product, and she cut out a niche segment of the market for doggy paw wax for dogs that live in the mountains that their owners don't want to work with, don't want to use petroleum products. Great product, works great, and she's still selling it. Here's an application for a downhole drilling manufacturer, an offshore drilling platform. An offshore drilling platform it's a really hostile environment. It has extremes of heat, temperature, salt spray. So all the things associated with an offshore oil well just tend to rot and be sprayed with salt and corrode. And so you need to coat all the parts. Particularly, you need to coat the drill bits and really all the parts. And so they wanted a polymer coating to be sprayed on things that had around 10 must-have technical requirements and half a dozen nice-to-haves. Needed to be sprayed from a nozzle, cover the equipment, dry quickly, be easily removable just by grabbing it and ripping it off, be reapplicable, stand up to salt spray, extreme hot, extreme cold, submersion in water. And so we developed a product that could be done in that way, and this is what it looks like. And the big offshore oil exploration companies are using it. So that just shows how far afield you need to go to be able to serve entrepreneurs and companies with entrepreneurial ideas in different industries. Many litigation support, many projects are done for litigation support. This is a particular one for a contract dispute. Whether a shipment of dolomite met a manufacturer's specification as having no acid insolubles, that is, no glass particles, everything should dissolve. So dolomite is a kind of sand. So we transferred in their method, which was an acid treatment method, and then generated data showing their acid insolubles. And I had to witness all this testing and show up in federal court and testify as an expert over 3 days. Multi-million-dollar lawsuit where one side said we met the specification, the other side said we didn't meet the specification. And the answer was determined by analytical chemistry, and I had to testify in front of a jury and convince them that our client was right, and that was the result. Here's an example of personal injury. This is one we decided to take on because there was a minor involved. A baby showed evidence of chemical burns after returning home from daycare. The burns were on the child wherever the diaper made contact. The school had sprayed a pesticide recently, and as it turns out, they sprayed in the area where the diapers were being stored. And so we analyzed this diaper that the father sent us. We extracted it. We performed a GC-MS analysis against a standard of pesticide because we know what the pesticides was. The school told us what they sprayed. They contracted it out to a company, and we knew what the company sprayed, so we got a sample of the pesticide. We not only found the active ingredient in the pesticide, but we found the synergist, which is one of the chemicals in the pesticide. So we found two chemicals that were in the pesticide that were then in the diaper that we extracted, and the odds of that happening with some sort of other chemical are de minimis. So the baby was using a diaper that had been exposed to these chemicals, and the lawsuit, the school and the pesticide sprayer, the pest control company were sued and did settle this because of the evidence that we provided, and the family got a settlement so they can take care of the baby. So where do we go from here? If you're interested in a career opportunity at Avomeen, visit avomeen.com/careers and you'll see our open positions and learn more about Avomeen. To apply for an open position, email your cover letter and CV to hr@avomeen.com. And if you are in school pursuing an undergraduate degree in STEM at a US-based college university, check out our STEM scholarship program. We do give scholarships. Thank you for listening.